She vanished the night before her cancer surgery, leaving behind the house she stole from me and a letter begging for forgiveness. But can you forgive someone who let your mother die just to inherit everything? I thought I'd buried the past, until I found the second will hidden in a cookbook. This story isn't about revenge, it's about the price of silence. Subscribe for more jaw-dropping family drama stories you won't forge. I never expected my sister to show up at the funeral, not after 5 years of silence, not after Mum died calling her name in a fog of dementia, not mine. But there she was, in a sleek black dress and heels too high for a cemetery, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue that looked more like a prop than grief. Camille always knew how to make an entrance, and somehow, even at our mother's funeral, she made herself the main event. I stood on the opposite side of the gravesite, clutching the folded program like it might keep my hands from shaking. Camille didn't acknowledge me until after the final shovel of dirt hit the casket. She walked over like we were meeting for brunch, not after years of silence soaked in resentment. "Tessa," she said, her voice smooth and unbothered, "you look tired?" I blinked. That was all she had to say? After everything? "I was taking care of Mum," I said flatly, "for the last 3 years. She smiled, that polished, insincere lawyer's smile I used to envy when I was too young to understand what it really meant. "Right, you were amazing. Really?" I didn't answer. There was nothing to say to someone who had disappeared when things got hard, who hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't sent a damn card when Mum forgot how to walk or when she stopped recognizing me. Camille had fled to New York, married a venture capitalist, divorced him 6 months later and never once looked back. Meanwhile, I was scrubbing bedpans and watching our mother wither like a houseplant left in the dark. We met with the estate attorney the next day in Mum's dusty old dining room. Paul had been our family's lawyer since we were teenagers. He used to hand us lollipops when we sat on the floor colouring while our parents discussed boring adult stuff. Now he looked older, more tired, the grey in his beard matching the sombre tone in the room. "There's a formal will," Paul said, unfolding the papers. "Diane made it 5 years ago, before her diagnosis. Everything, house, savings, assets, is left to Camille." Silence. I couldn't breathe. Camille didn't even flinch. She just nodded like she'd been expecting it. Maybe she had. I stared at Paul. That can't be right. I was the one here. I gave up my job, my apartment. I did everything. "I understand," he said gently. "But legally, the will is valid and binding. There's no mention of a revision?" My voice cracked. "She wrote a new one. I saw her writing it 2 months ago. She said she didn't want to leave me with nothing." Paul's eyes shifted. "Unless it was notarized and witnessed, it doesn't hold up in court." Camille finally spoke. "Let's be honest, Tess. Mum wasn't exactly in her right mind near the end. Maybe you imagined it." I stood up so fast the chair nearly fell back. "I cleaned her vomit off the floor at 3 a.m. while you were drinking rooftop martinis in Manhattan. Don't you dare talk to me about imagination." But Camille just smiled again, that same impenetrable mask. "This is what Mum wanted." "No. This is what Camille made happen." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Mum's last few weeks. Her confused, scared eyes, the way she held my hand so tightly I had to pry it free to go to the bathroom. I remembered the way she tucked something into the worn pages of her favourite cookbook, whispering, "In case she comes back and I'm not here." At 2 a.m, I crept down to the kitchen and pulled the cookbook off the shelf. The spine cracked like old bones. I flipped through pages smudged with flour and oil, past her banana bread and pecan pie recipes, and there it was, folded in half, written in her shaky cursive. A letter. A new will. Unwitnessed, unofficial, but real. She left me everything. The house, the savings, the garden she loved, even the set of crystal Camille had always coveted. "I know your sister won't understand," Mum had written, "but you were here, you stayed, that matters." I sat there at the kitchen table for hours, the paper trembling in my hands. The legal world might say it was meaningless, but to me, it was the only truth that mattered. When I confronted Camille the next day, she laughed. "You're not serious. A handwritten note? Come on, Tessa." I was serious, dead serious. And that's when I realized the battle wasn't over. It had just begun. 3 days after the funeral, I came home from the grocery store to find a for sale sign staked right in the middle of the front lawn. I froze, one foot still on the porch, the brown paper bag of apples and bread threatening to slip from my fingers. The sign was red and white, shiny, smug, and hanging from it a flyer with glossy photos of the house I grew up in. My mother's rose bushes, the porch swing I repainted last spring, and the bedroom window that had been mine since I was 8. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I stormed into the house, the screen door slamming shut behind me. Camille was in the living room, scrolling through her phone like she lived there, like she'd never left. She didn't even look up. "You listed the house?" I asked, my voice flat and trembling. She glanced up, smiled slightly. "The market's great right now. It'd be stupid not to." I dropped the groceries onto the counter with a thud. "This is my home." She tilted her head, mock sympathetic. "It was Mum's. Legally, now it's mine. You can stay through the closing, of course. We can work something out. We're not selling." "You don't get to decide that." She stood, brushing invisible dust off her designer jeans. "Look, I know this is hard for you, but you've always been too emotionally attached to things. It's just a house. Just a house." That house held every memory of my mother's laughter, her humming while making breakfast, her voice reading bedtime stories in the hallway when I had nightmares. It wasn't just wood and drywall, it was her. I tried to breathe through the rising heat in my chest. "What if I fight this?" Camille gave a small shrug. "Then you'll waste your money, your time, and end up in court against someone who actually knows how to win." She was right. She was a lawyer, and I was a caregiver who hadn't worked a salaried job in 2 years. That night, I sat on the back porch staring at the dark sky. The crickets were loud, like they were trying to drown out my thoughts. I took out Mum's letter again. Her writing was faint in the moonlight. I know Camille will be angry. I know she'll feel left out. But I hope one day she'll understand. You gave me everything when I had nothing left. The next morning I called Paul. He sounded tired. "I know it's unfair, Tessa, but unless that letter was witnessed or notarized, it won't hold up. Can you look at it anyway?" I asked. "Just tell me if there's anything." There was a long pause. "Bring it in." 2 days later, I sat in Paul's office, my palms sweating as he read through the note. His office still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old leather. It hadn't changed in decades. He looked older now, though, slower. "I remember Diane mentioning something," he said finally. "A few weeks before she passed, she said she wanted to revisit her will. She said she was afraid Camille would take things the wrong way. She didn't update it." He shook his head. "We scheduled a meeting. She never showed up. I assumed she forgot." "With her condition..." "She didn't forget," I said. "She wrote this." "It won't stand in court, Tessa," he said gently. "I'm sorry." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. Then I stood to leave. But before I reached the door, he said, "There might be another way." I turned. "What do you mean?" "If you can prove that Camille manipulated Diane, pressured her while she was already showing signs of cognitive decline, then the original will could be challenged." My pulse quickened. That's a long shot. Most things worth doing are. That night, I went digging. I pulled out Mum's old pill planner, her journals, her calendar entries. I found notes in her handwriting with phrases like, "Camille upset again," and "came by, said I was being cruel." One note read, "Tired of arguing, signed the thing, too much noise." And then, tucked between 2 pages of an old tax folder, I found a printed email. From Camille. Subject line, we need to get this done before she forgets. I stared at it, my heart pounding. The next morning I printed copies of everything and brought them to Paul. His eyes widened as he read. This is something. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Camille began scheduling showings, walking strangers through the house while I hid in the backyard, like a ghost haunting her own life. One afternoon, I came in to find her in Mum's bedroom, packing up jewelry and books. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Dividing things up." "Don't worry, you can keep that old quilt you love." I looked at her. "You don't get to decide what I keep." She rolled her eyes. "Grow up, Tessa. This isn't some Nicholas Sparks novel, it's real life. She chose me." "She didn't," I said. "She was scared and sick, and you knew it." Her mouth twitched, just slightly, a crack in the armor. But it vanished. "You don't know anything." I did. I knew enough. Paul filed a petition to challenge the will, and just like that, we were at war. Camille didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after the petition was filed. She stayed in a hotel across town, sent her realtor to handle the showings, and left a single voicemail that I listened to at least a dozen times. "This is pathetic, Tessa. You know you can't win. You're wasting time and money on a fantasy. Let it go." But I didn't let it go, because for once in my life, I was done being the quiet one, the one who made space, who cleaned up after everyone else's mess. Camille had always been the firework, loud, impossible to ignore, and I had always been the soft light that filled in the background. But not anymore. Paul filed the paperwork quietly, carefully. The petition argued undue influence and cognitive impairment. We submitted the email, the journal entries, and a timeline of Mum's medical decline. Paul warned me it would be messy, it would get personal. I said I didn't care. But I did. God, I did. Because when the court ordered both sides to submit supporting testimonies, Camille hit back harder than I expected. She hired a private firm to dig through my past. They pulled old bank records, text messages, even a voicemail from 2 years ago where I broke down crying to a friend and said, "I can't do this anymore. I hate her sometimes." Camille's lawyer submitted it as evidence of emotional instability. Tessa resented her mother, the report said. She was not an unbiased caregiver. I sat in Paul's office while he read it aloud. I felt my cheeks burn with shame. "That was one night," I said. "I was exhausted. She'd called me her sister 6 times and poured soup into the bathroom sink." "You don't have to explain," Paul said. "I know, but I felt like I had to. Because that was what it always was with Camille, defending myself against her polished image, her curated version of the truth. Then came the subpoena. Paul called me on a rainy Tuesday. "We have a problem," he said. "Camille's team is requesting all medical records from Diane's last 6 months. So," he hesitated, "they think you may have medicated her improperly." My chest tightened. "That's not true. I believe you. But they're going to make it look like elder abuse." The ground under me felt like it shifted. I hadn't just cared for my mother. I had fed her, bathed her, changed her adult diapers when she was too far gone to stand, and now I was being painted as an opportunist, as someone who had manipulated a dying woman for a house. Camille knew exactly where to hit. And it worked. That night I drank wine straight from the bottle and went through a box of old photos. I found one from Christmas, 3 years ago. Mum sitting on the couch in her red robe, my arm around her shoulder. Camille wasn't there. She'd sent a card with no return address. The next morning, I found myself in front of Paul's office before it opened. He let me in, handed me coffee without asking. "I don't want to do this anymore," I said. "She's winning." He looked at me for a long moment. "Do you want the house?" I blinked. "It's not about the house." "Then what is it about?" I didn't know how to answer that. Maybe it was about justice. Maybe it was about being seen. Maybe it was about standing up for the version of my mother who, even when she was forgetting her own name, never forgot mine. 2 days later, Camille showed up at the house. I opened the door cautiously. She looked tired. Her eyes puffy, hair damp from the drizzle outside. She didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me and stepped inside. "I'm not doing this anymore," she said. "You win." I blinked. "What?" She sat on the couch like it still belonged to her, then pulled out a folder. "Here. A settlement. You get the house, I get the savings account. No more court." I stared at her. "Why now?" Camille exhaled slowly. "Because I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. Because I opened a letter Mum wrote me that I never read. She left it in a shoebox at the bottom of her closet. It said, 'She forgave me.'" "For what?" She looked up, her eyes suddenly wet. "For leaving. For not coming back. For giving up." I sat across from her, unsure of what to say. Camille wiped her eyes. "You know what the worst part is? I told myself for years that Mum was cruel, controlling, that she loved you more. That's how I survived. But maybe I just didn't know how to stay." Something cracked inside me. I'd waited years to hear her say anything close to this, but instead of feeling vindicated, I felt hollow. "I wasn't trying to steal from you," I said. "I just couldn't let her be erased." She nodded. "You didn't. She remembered you, even when she forgot everything else." We sat there in silence. Two women orbiting the same grief from opposite ends. Eventually, Camille stood. "I'm going back to New York. You won't hear from me for a while." I didn't ask why. She paused in the doorway. "One more thing," she said, without turning around. "You should get that mole on your shoulder checked. It wasn't there last time I saw you." And then she left. That was the last time I saw her for 11 months. 11 months passed without a single word from Camille. I didn't expect her to call, but I kept half waiting anyway. Maybe because she'd always had a way of leaving holes behind when she vanished. Maybe because, deep down, I didn't believe that last conversation had really been goodbye. I kept the house. I paid the property taxes late more than once. I took a job at the local pharmacy to make ends meet. I turned Mum's garden into something that looked like life again. Sunflowers and lavender and stubborn tomatoes. I didn't touch her room for a long time. It stayed the way she left it, with the quilt folded at the end of the bed and the smell of her lotion clinging to the curtains. I found comfort in the stillness. Then, one night in April, I got a letter. No return address. My name handwritten on the envelope, slanted and familiar. Inside was a single page. "Tessa, I have breast cancer. Stage 3. I didn't tell anyone else yet. I didn't know who else to tell. I don't want your pity, I don't want to die alone. See." I read it 3 times. Then I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring out the window at the garden I'd planted, wondering if grace was something we gave to others or something we gave to ourselves. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. Her face was thinner, hair cut short, a scarf wrapped around her head, no makeup. She looked younger and older at the same time. "I didn't come to ask for anything," she said. "I just needed somewhere to breathe." I stepped aside. She stayed for a week. She slept in the guest room and barely ate. I made her smoothies and soup the same way I used to for Mum. She flinched the first time I touched her shoulder, like the kindness burned. On the 5th night, she knocked on my bedroom door. "I'm scared," she said. "I thought I could do this on my own, but I can't, and I don't deserve help, but I need it." I let her crawl into bed beside me like we were kids again, back when thunder scared her and she'd sneak into my room without saying a word. The next morning, she handed me a folder. Living will, healthcare proxy, power of attorney. I'm giving you everything. Not because I expect anything in return, but because I trust you. Something in my chest cracked open. "You're not dying," I said, trying to believe it. She smiled sadly. Aren't we all? The weeks blurred. Chemotherapy hit her like a freight train. I held her hair back when she vomited. I changed her bandages. I emptied bedpans. It felt familiar, like muscle memory from Mum's last months. Camille cried. The first time I tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead, she cried harder the second time, when I didn't say anything at all. Some nights she'd tell stories I never knew, about the man she almost married before her ex, about the time she considered becoming a chef, about how guilty she felt not showing up when Mum was dying. She loved you, I said one night. She missed you every day. Camille didn't respond. She just reached for my hand and held it like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. Then came the day she disappeared. I came home from a pharmacy shift to find her room empty. The bed made, her scarf folded neatly on the nightstand. No sign of struggle, no note. At first I panicked. I called the hospitals, the shelters. I filed a missing person report. Days passed, no news. Then, a week later, I found the envelope. It was taped to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, behind the flour. Tessa, I couldn't stay. I know what's coming, and I want to face it on my own terms. I didn't want you to watch me fade like we watched her. I'm sorry for all the ways I failed you. I'm sorry it took dying for me to understand what you were worth. I've transferred everything, house, savings, what's left of the insurance. It's all in your name now. Do with it what I couldn't. Build something that lived. Inside was the updated deed. Bank papers, an insurance policy, a copy of the letter Mum had written to Camille, creased and worn at the edges. I forgive you, it said. I just want you to come home. I cried for hours. I kept checking the mail, the front step, the voicemail. Nothing, no more letters, no closure. Just the silence Camille always left in her wake. 3 months later, I got a call from Paul. They found her body, he said softly. Abandoned motel just outside Asheville. Looks like she checked in under a fake name. My knees buckled. He sent the report. I didn't read it. I arranged for her cremation. I didn't invite anyone. I buried the urn beneath the rosebush she planted with Mum when she was 10. No headstone, just a small wooden sign that read, "Forgiven." A week later, while organising her documents, I found something I wasn't meant to see. A letter from Paul, dated 2 months before Camille came back. Camille, I received your request to void the original settlement. Be advised, if you proceed, the house and accounts will be legally transferred to Tessa. Please confirm. Paul. She had made the decision before she ever stepped foot through my door. She didn't come to die. She came to return what never should have been hers. But she didn't want me to know that. And I never told anyone. Because some things we carry in silence, not out of guilt, but out of love. 6 months after Camille's death, the house felt like mine, but only in the legal sense. The walls still whispered her footsteps. The hallway still echoed the sound of her soft cough at midnight. I kept expecting to hear her voice, sarcastic, sharp, apologetic. I had her ashes buried, yes, but grief doesn't disappear with paperwork. It lingers like smoke in a room long after the fire has gone out. People in town started asking questions. Camille's name surfaced again at the farmer's market, the pharmacy, even at the bank. Everyone had heard a version of what happened, that she died alone, that she had no funeral, that she left behind everything. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with suspicion. A few even asked, "Didn't she try to steal the house from you?" I never corrected them. I let them believe whatever version made them sleep better at night. The truth was heavier than I knew how to carry. One Sunday morning, I walked into church for the first time in over a year. I sat in the back, where the pews creaked and the old hymnals still smelled like dust and ink. Reverend Carter gave a sermon on mercy. He said, "Mercy is not weakness, it's not silence. It's the strength to tell the truth even when it costs you something." That night, I pulled out the letters. Mum's to Camille, Camille's to me, Paul's note about the transfer, and I laid them all on the kitchen table like puzzle pieces that no longer needed to fit. The next day, I wrote an obituary. Not for the newspaper, for the truth. Camille Monroe, 35, died of breast cancer in a motel room outside Asheville, North Carolina. She was smart, difficult, brilliant, and often misunderstood. She left behind a younger sister, Tessa, whom she once hurt deeply, but in the end returned to with open hands. Camille was not a hero. She was not a villain. She was a woman who made mistakes, then tried to make them right. May she be remembered with honesty, not perfection. I posted it anonymously on a blog about sibling loss. Within hours it had comments. Some kind, some cruel. One simply said, "I wish my sister had done the same." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the things Camille left unsaid, not just to me, but to the world, and the things I still hadn't said either. So I called Paul. "I want to donate the house," I said. There was a long pause. "Are you sure?" "Yes, to a transitional shelter, women re-entering after prison, domestic abuse survivors, anyone who needs a place to start over." He cleared his throat. "That's generous. It's not generosity, it's legacy." I moved out a month later, packed up Mum's quilt, Camille's scarf, the recipes we both hated but cooked anyway. I left the rosebush untouched. People in town talked again. Some said I'd lost my mind, others called it noble. A few whispered that maybe I was trying to buy redemption. I let them talk. I rented a small apartment on the edge of town. I went back to school part-time, studied social work. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. One evening, while sorting books at the local library where I volunteered, I found a worn-out copy of Little Women. Inside the cover, in faded pencil, was a note in Camille's handwriting. "Joe was always your favourite. I never understood why until now." I laughed, out loud, startled a woman in the aisle next to me. And then I cried. Not out of sadness, out of something more complicated. Relief, regret, love. A year later, a reporter reached out. She was doing a feature on restored homes turned shelters. She wanted to include mine, well, the one I gave away. "Can we do a full story?" she asked. "It's inspiring." "No," I said, "but you can tell them this. It was a house built on grief, lived in with resentment, and given away with love." The article ran anyway. The headline read, "Sister's final gift becomes a new beginning for dozens." I didn't correct them, not this time. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder, what if I had told the whole truth? What if people knew Camille came back before she was sick? What if they knew she'd planned to give me everything before she even knocked on my door? Would they forgive her? Would I? I don't have the answer. Maybe that's what mercy really is. Not forgetting, not excusing, but choosing to let someone rest without finishing the argument. Camille was complicated. So am I. So was Mum. None of us were saints. But we tried, and sometimes trying is all we owe the dead.